The morning sun filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Hayes Corporation building, casting long shadows across the marble lobby. Emma Rodriguez pushed her cleaning cart toward the executive elevators, her worn sneakers squeaking softly against the polished floor. At 26, she had been working as a cleaner in this Manhattan skyscraper for 3 years, invisible to most of the suited executives who rushed past her daily. "Morning, Emma," called out Marcus, the security guard, from behind his desk. His warm smile was one of the few bright spots in her early morning routine. "Good morning, Marcus," she replied in her slightly accented English, tucking a strand of dark hair behind her ear. "How's little Sophia doing with her math homework?" "Much better since you helped her with those fractions last week. You're a lifesaver." Marcus's genuine appreciation made Emma's chest warm. Despite having a master's degree in literature from Mexico City, she found purpose in these small moments of connection. Emma stepped into the elevator, pressing the button for the 42nd floor. The executive level she cleaned every Tuesday and Friday. The building housed hundreds of employees, but the top floors remained mysteriously quiet, occupied by only a handful of high-ranking executives who seemed to exist in a different world entirely. As the elevator climbed, Emma mentally rehearsed her routine. Start with the conference rooms, then the individual offices, finish with the executive suite. She had it down to a science, moving efficiently through spaces that cost more to furnish than she made in 5 years. The elevator dinged softly, and Emma emerged onto the executive floor. The silence here always struck her, so different from the bustling activity on the lower levels. Thick carpeting muffled every sound, and the air carried the faint scent of expensive leather and coffee. She began with Conference Room A, methodically wiping down the massive mahogany table where million-dollar decisions were made daily. Through the windows, she could see Central Park in the distance, a green oasis in the concrete jungle. Sometimes she wondered what it would feel like to make decisions in a room like this, to have people hang on your every word. "Focus, Emma," she whispered to herself, moving to dust the built-in bookshelf lined with business journals and awards. 2 hours later, she had worked her way through most of the floor. Only one office remained, the corner suite belonging to Alexander Hayes himself. She had cleaned his office dozens of times, but had never actually seen the man. He was either traveling, in meetings, or working such odd hours that their paths never crossed. Emma knocked gently on the door, waiting for the customary silence before using her master key. But today, a deep voice called out, "Come in." Her heart skipped. She considered retreating, claiming she could come back later, but her supervisor had been clear about maintaining the schedule. Taking a deep breath, she opened the door. "I'm sorry to disturb you, Mr. Hayes. I'm just here to clean. I can come back." "No, it's fine. Please, go ahead." Emma's eyes found him behind the enormous desk, and she felt her breath catch slightly. Alexander Hayes was younger than she had expected, probably in his early 30s, with dark hair that looked like he'd been running his fingers through it, and intense green eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. His white dress shirt was rolled up at the sleeves, and his tie was loosened. He looked more approachable than the cold corporate images she'd seen in business magazines. "Thank you, sir," she managed, wheeling her cart into the office and trying to ignore how her pulse had quickened. Alexander barely looked up as she began her routine, focused intently on whatever was displayed on his multiple monitors. Emma worked quietly, dusting the furniture and emptying the wastebaskets. She was reaching to clean behind his desk when it happened. Her foot caught on the cart's wheel, sending her stumbling forward. As she tried to catch herself, her knee hit the corner of the desk, and she heard the unmistakable sound of fabric tearing. Looking down in horror, she realized her skirt had caught on a metal edge and torn from the hem to mid-thigh. Time seemed to freeze. Emma stood there, her face burning with mortification, acutely aware that her bright pink underwear was now visible to one of the most powerful men in New York City. She wanted the floor to swallow her whole. Alexander looked up at the sound, and Emma braced herself for dismissal, humiliation, or worse. Instead, she watched his expression shift from surprise to something that looked almost like concern. Without a word, he stood up, shrugged off his suit jacket, and walked around the desk toward her. Emma instinctively stepped back, but he held out his jacket with both hands. "Here," he said softly, his voice gentler than she had expected. "Put this on." Emma stared at him, too shocked to move. "Sir, I'm so sorry. I'll pay for any damage to your desk, and I'll—" "Emma," the fact that he knew her name surprised them both. "Put on the jacket." With trembling hands, she accepted the jacket and wrapped it around her waist, tying the sleeves to cover the tear. The fabric smelled like expensive cologne and something uniquely him. "Thank you," she whispered, unable to meet his eyes. Alexander returned to his desk, but instead of sitting down, he opened his bottom drawer and pulled out what looked like a company credit card. "There's a department store 2 blocks south of here. Take this, buy yourself a new skirt, and take the rest of the day off." Emma's eyes widened. "No, sir, I can't accept that. No. It was my clumsiness. The desk has a sharp edge that should have been filed down years ago. This was an accident, and it could have happened to anyone." He held out the card, his green eyes meeting hers directly for the first time. "Please." Something in his tone made her reach for the card, their fingers brushing briefly in the exchange. The contact sent an unexpected jolt through her. "I'll return your jacket tomorrow," she said quietly. "Keep it," he replied, sitting back down. "It looks better on you than it ever did on me." Emma felt heat rise in her cheeks again, but this time it wasn't entirely from embarrassment. "Thank you, Mr. Hayes. You're very kind." As she gathered her cleaning supplies, she could feel his eyes on her. At the door, she turned back to find him watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Emma," he called out, just as she reached for the door handle. "Yes, sir? It's Alexander. And are you all right? You didn't hurt yourself when you fell?" The genuine concern in his voice made her chest tighten unexpectedly. "I'm fine. Thank you for asking. Alexander." His name felt strange on her tongue, intimate in a way that made her pulse race. "Good," he said, and she thought she saw the hint of a smile before he turned back to his monitors. Emma left the office in a daze, Alexander's jacket still tied around her waist. In the elevator, she caught her reflection in the polished steel doors. Her cheeks were flushed, her dark eyes bright with an emotion she didn't want to name. Outside, on the busy Manhattan sidewalk, Emma walked the 2 blocks to the department store in a trance. The whole encounter felt surreal. Alexander Hayes, the Alexander Hayes, had been kind to her. More than kind. He had been gentle, thoughtful. Nothing like the cold corporate mogul she had imagined. In the store, she found herself in the women's section, holding the company card and feeling overwhelmed. She had never been given such freedom with money before. Everything seemed too expensive, too nice for someone like her. "Can I help you find something?" asked a sales associate, a woman about Emma's age, with perfectly styled blonde hair and a warm smile. "I need a skirt for work," Emma said hesitantly. "Something simple, professional." "What's your budget?" Emma showed her the card. "My boss said to buy a skirt, but I don't want to spend too much." The associate's eyes lit up. "Oh, honey, if your boss gave you a card like that, he's not worried about the cost. Come on, let's find you something gorgeous." For the next hour, Emma found herself trying on skirts she never would have dared to look at before. The associate, who introduced herself as Jessica, seemed determined to find the perfect outfit. "This one," Jessica announced, holding up a navy blue pencil skirt with subtle pinstripes. "It's professional but flattering, and it'll go with everything. Try it with this blouse." Emma emerged from the dressing room, wearing the skirt paired with a soft cream-colored blouse that the associate had selected. Looking in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. The outfit fit perfectly, accentuating her figure in all the right places while remaining entirely appropriate for work. "You look amazing," Jessica said genuinely. "Your boss is going to be speechless." Emma felt her cheeks warm at the comment. "It's not like that. He was just being kind." "Uh-huh," Jessica said with a knowing smile. Well, kind boss or not, you deserve to feel this good about yourself every day. Walking back to the Hayes Corporation building, Emma carried her shopping bag and still wore Alexander's jacket tied around her waist. She had spent more money in one afternoon than she usually spent on clothes in 6 months, but Jessica had been right. She felt different, confident, beautiful even. Back in the building, she took the elevator to the basement level where the employee lockers were located. She changed into her new outfit, carefully folding Alexander's jacket. Looking in the small mirror above the sinks, she hardly recognized the woman staring back at her. The navy skirt hugged her curves perfectly, and the cream blouse brought out the warmth in her brown skin. For the first time in years, Emma felt like she looked as educated and capable as she knew herself to be. "Damn, girl," Marcus called out as she passed his desk on her way out. "You clean up nice. Hot date tonight?" Emma laughed, feeling lighter than she had in months. Just felt like trying something new. "Well, whatever it is, it's working. You're glowing." As Emma walked to the subway station, Alexander's jacket folded carefully in her arms. She couldn't stop replaying the morning's events. The way he had looked at her, really looked at her, when he handed her his jacket, the concern in his voice when he asked if she was hurt, the way he had said her name, like he had been thinking about it. She shook her head, trying to dismiss the thoughts. Men like Alexander Hayes didn't notice women like her, not really. He had simply been a decent human being in an embarrassing situation. Tomorrow, things would go back to normal. She would return his jacket, thank him again, and continue cleaning his office as if nothing had happened. But as she settled into her seat on the subway, Emma caught her reflection in the window again. The woman looking back at her seemed to disagree. This woman looked like she could handle whatever tomorrow might bring. This woman looked like she might be ready for her life to change. And deep down, in a place she had kept carefully locked away, Emma felt a flutter of hope that maybe, just maybe, it already had. Emma arrived at work the next morning 30 minutes earlier than usual, Alexander's jacket pressed and folded in a neat garment bag she had borrowed from her roommate. She had barely slept, alternating between replaying every moment of their encounter and trying to convince herself that she was reading too much into a simple act of kindness. Her reflection in the elevator's polished doors showed the same woman who had left work yesterday, professional, composed, wearing the navy skirt and cream blouse that had transformed how she saw herself. But inside, her stomach churned with nervous energy. "You look different," Marcus observed as she passed his desk. "Good different. Like you won the lottery or something." "Just trying out my new clothes," Emma replied, though they both knew it was more than that. The executive floor seemed even quieter than usual as Emma began her routine. She saved Alexander's office for last, her heart hammering against her ribs as she approached his door. Taking a deep breath, she knocked softly. "Come in." Alexander was already at his desk, focused on his computer screen. He wore a charcoal grey suit today, perfectly tailored, and his dark hair looked freshly styled. Emma noticed details she'd been too flustered to see yesterday. The way he drummed his fingers against his desk when thinking, the small scar above his left eyebrow, the fact that he drank his coffee black from a simple white mug rather than some expensive designer cup. "Good morning, Mr. Hayes," she said formally, then caught herself. "Alexander." He looked up, and Emma watched his expression change as he took in her appearance. His green eyes widened slightly, traveling from her face down to her outfit and back up again. For a moment, he seemed to forget whatever he had been working on. "Good morning, Emma. You look—" He paused, as if searching for the right word. "Professional. The outfit suits you. Thank you." "I brought your jacket back." She held up the garment bag. "I had it pressed." "You didn't need to do that." Alexander stood up and walked around his desk. He was taller than she remembered, probably 6'2" to her 5'5", and she caught that same subtle scent of cologne that had lingered on his jacket. "It was the least I could do after you were so kind yesterday." Emma unzipped the bag and handed him the jacket. Their fingers brushed again in the exchange, and she felt the same jolt of electricity as before. Alexander held the jacket but didn't put it on. Instead, he continued to study her face with an intensity that made her self-conscious. "Emma, can I ask you something?" "Of course. What did you study in college?" The question caught her completely off guard. Why do you ask?" "Humor me." Emma hesitated. Most people in the building had no idea about her educational background, and she had learned that mentioning it often made her co-workers uncomfortable or suspicious. But something in Alexander's tone made her answer honestly. "Literature. I have a master's degree from Universidad Nacional Autónoma de México." Alexander nodded, as if this confirmed something he had suspected. "And before you came to New York?" "I taught high school in Mexico City for 2 years. Emma felt heat rise in her cheeks. "Look, I know what you're thinking." "What am I thinking?" "That I'm overqualified for this job. That I should be doing something else." "I've heard it before." "Actually," Alexander said quietly, "I was thinking that I was right about you." "Right about me?" "Yesterday, when you were dusting the bookshelf, you spent extra time on my first edition copy of 100 Years of Solitude. Most people wouldn't have recognized it, let alone handled it with that kind of care." Emma stared at him. "You were watching me? I was trying to work, but you were distracting." The admission seemed to surprise him as much as it did her. "The way you moved through the office, the attention you paid to everything. It wasn't just cleaning. It was respect for the space, for the books, for the work being done here." Emma didn't know how to respond. No one had ever described her work that way before. "Garcia Marquez is one of my favorite authors," she said finally. "Mine too, though I prefer his earlier work to the later novels." They stood there for a moment, the air between them charged with something Emma couldn't name. The conversation felt dangerous somehow, like crossing a line neither of them had meant to approach. Alexander's phone buzzed, breaking the spell. He glanced at it and frowned. "I have a meeting in 5 minutes, he said, though he sounded reluctant. "Emma, thank you for returning the jacket. Thank you again for lending it to me." As Emma gathered her cleaning supplies, she could feel him watching her. At the door, she turned back to find him still standing where she had left him, jacket in hand, an expression of confusion on his face, as if he couldn't quite figure out what had just happened. "Have a good meeting, Alexander." "Emma, wait!" She paused, her hand on the door handle. Would you like to have coffee sometime? I mean, to discuss literature? I don't get many chances to talk about books with someone who actually understands them." Emma's heart stopped. Alexander Hayes was asking her to have coffee, to discuss literature. It felt like a dream, and a nightmare rolled into one. "I don't think that would be appropriate," she heard herself say. "Why not? You're you, and I'm—" She gestured to her cleaning cart. "This is my job, Mr. Hayes. Alexander, I need this job." Something shifted in his expression, disappointment maybe, or understanding. "Of course, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have asked." "It's not that I wouldn't want to," Emma said quickly, then immediately regretted the admission. It's complicated." "I understand." But his tone suggested he didn't. Not really. Emma left his office feeling like she had just made a terrible mistake, though she couldn't say what the right choice would have been. The rest of her workday passed in a haze. She couldn't concentrate on anything, replaying their conversation over and over. That evening, Emma sat in the small apartment she shared with her roommate Carmen in Queens, staring at her laptop screen without really seeing it. Carmen, a nurse who worked night shifts at Mount Sinai, was getting ready for work. "You've been weird all afternoon," Carmen observed, applying mascara in the mirror by the door. "What happened?" "And don't tell me nothing. I've known you for 3 years." Emma sighed. "A man asked me to have coffee with him. And that's bad because he's my boss. Well, not my direct boss, but he owns the company where I work." Carmen nearly dropped her mascara wand. "Wait, what, Emma? Start from the beginning, Art." So Emma told her everything: the torn skirt, Alexander's kindness, the shopping trip, their conversation about literature, the coffee invitation. Carmen listened with growing amazement. "Let me get this straight," Carmen said when Emma finished. "A billionaire asks you out and you said no? It wasn't a date, he wanted to discuss books." "Duh, honey, no man asks a woman to discuss books unless he's interested in more than her mind. Trust me on this. Even if that were true, which it's not, I could lose my job. There are rules about fraternization, power dynamics. There are also rules about life being too short to pass up amazing opportunities." Carmen sat down next to Emma on their second-hand couch. "Look, I get it. You're scared. But what if this is exactly what you've been waiting for? What if it's not? What if I'm just some charity case he feels sorry for? Did he seem like he felt sorry for you?" Emma thought about the way Alexander had looked at her that morning, the intensity in his eyes, the genuine interest when he asked about her education. "No," she admitted. "Then maybe you should give him a chance. And yourself." That night, Emma lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Carmen's words echoed in her mind, mixing with memories of Alexander's voice, the warmth in his green eyes, the way he had said her name like he was testing how it felt. She thought about her life in Mexico City, the teaching job she had loved, the literature classes where she had felt truly alive, the dreams she had put on hold when her father's business failed and her family needed her support. She had come to New York with plans to eventually return to academia, but 3 years later, she was still cleaning offices and sending most of her earnings home. Maybe Carmen was right. Maybe this was an opportunity not just for romance, though the thought made her pulse race, but for something more. A chance to use her mind again, to have conversations about things that mattered to her. The next morning, Emma arrived at work with the decision half made. She would finish the executive floor and see if Alexander was in his office. If he was, she would, what? Apologize for being abrupt? Accept his coffee invitation? The possibilities both thrilled and terrified her. But when she reached Alexander's office, she found it empty. His computer was off, his coffee mug was clean, and there was no sign he had been there at all. Emma tried to hide her disappointment as she cleaned, telling herself it was for the best. She was dusting his bookshelf when she noticed something new, a small piece of paper tucked between the pages of the Garcia Marquez novel. With trembling fingers, she pulled it out. Written in neat handwriting were the words, "What matters in life is not what happens to you, but what you remember and how you remember it." Below the quote was a phone number and the initials AH. Emma stared at the note, her heart pounding. It was a quote from Garcia Marquez, from his memoir Living to Tell the Tale. Alexander had left her a message, hidden in the pages of a book he knew she would notice. She folded the paper carefully and slipped it into her pocket, where it seemed to burn against her hip for the rest of the day. As she worked, she found herself composing and discarding mental responses. Should she text him, call, pretend she never found the note? By the time her shift ended, Emma had made up her mind. She pulled out her phone and typed a message, deleting and retyping it several times before finally hitting send. Memory is the only way of giving coherence to existence. Garcia Marquez. Thank you for the quote. And yes, I would like to discuss literature over coffee. This is Emma. She sent the message before she could lose her courage, then immediately wanted to snatch it back. But her phone buzzed almost instantly with a response. Tomorrow, 2 p.m., there's a small cafe called The Book Corner on 47th and 3rd. They have excellent coffee and even better conversation. Alexander. Emma stared at the message, reading it 3 times before the reality sank in. She had a coffee date with Alexander Hayes. A literature discussion. Whatever it was happening. She typed back, "I'll be there." His response came quickly. "I'm looking forward to it, more than you know." As Emma rode the subway home, she caught her reflection in the window again. The woman looking back at her was smiling, and for the first time in 3 years, she looked like someone who was about to step into a life she actually wanted to live. Tomorrow, everything would change. She could feel it in her bones, in the way her heart raced every time she thought about sitting across from Alexander in a coffee shop, talking about books and ideas and maybe, just maybe, discovering what else they might have in common. The note in her pocket felt like a promise, and for once Emma was ready to find out what that promise might hold. Emma changed outfits 3 times before settling on a simple black dress that Carmen had insisted she buy months ago, but had never worn. It was elegant without being flashy, professional, yet feminine. Perfect for a meeting that existed in the undefined space between business and pleasure. "You look gorgeous," Carmen said, appearing in the doorway with a cup of coffee. "But you also look terrified." "Because I am terrified." Emma checked her reflection one more time. "What am I doing, Carmen? This is insane." "You're having coffee with a man who clearly finds you fascinating. That's not insane. That's Tuesday afternoon. He's a billionaire, Carmen. I clean his office. And you also have a master's degree in literature and speak 3 languages. Stop selling yourself short." Carmen handed her the coffee. "Besides, he's the one who asked you out." "It's not a date," Emma protested, but even she didn't sound convinced anymore. The book corner was exactly what Emma had hoped for. Small, cozy, with mismatched furniture and walls lined with books. The afternoon crowd was light, mostly students with laptops and a few business people having late lunches. Emma arrived 5 minutes early and chose a table near the window, her hands trembling slightly as she ordered a latte. At exactly 2 o'clock, Alexander walked through the door, and Emma's breath caught. He had traded his usual suit for dark jeans and a navy button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up. He looked younger, more relaxed, but no less commanding. His eyes scanned the cafe until they found her, and the smile that crossed his face made her stomach flutter. "Emma." He approached her table, and she was struck again by his height, the confident way he moved. "Thank you for coming. Thank you for the invitation," and the Garcia Marquez quote. "I wasn't sure you'd find it." Alexander sat down across from her, and suddenly the small table felt intimate. "I hoped you would. I always pay attention to your books. They tell me a lot about who you are." "And what do they tell you?" Emma considered the question seriously. "That you're thoughtful, curious, that you value ideas over material things, even though you have plenty of material things. Your collection ranges from classic literature to modern business theory to philosophy. You're someone who never stops learning." Alexander stared at her for a moment, his green eyes intense. "No one has ever analyzed my bookshelf before. Most people probably don't spend as much time looking at it as I do. Most people don't see it the way you do." He paused as the waitress brought him coffee, black, as Emma had expected. "Tell me about your teaching. What did you love about it?" For the next hour, Emma found herself opening up in ways she hadn't in years. She told Alexander about her favorite students, the thrill of watching teenagers discover that literature could speak to their own lives, the way a perfectly crafted sentence could change how someone saw the world. "I had this one student, Miguel," she said, warming to the subject. "He was convinced he hated reading, said it was boring and pointless. Then we read The House on Mango Street by Sandra Cisneros. Something about Esperanza's story connected with him. The feeling of being caught between 2 worlds, wanting to escape, but not wanting to forget where you came from." "Sounds familiar," Alexander said quietly. Emma looked up, surprised by something in his tone. "What do you mean?" "The feeling of being caught between worlds. I grew up in a middle-class family in Ohio. My father was a high school math teacher. My mother worked at the library. When I started making money, real money, everything changed. Sometimes I feel like I'm living someone else's life." This glimpse of vulnerability surprised Emma. "Do you miss it? Your old life?" "Sometimes. I miss the simplicity. The way people used to talk to me before they knew who I was." He met her eyes. "The way you talked to me before you knew who I was." "I didn't know who you were when my skirt tore," Emma realized. "I just saw a man in an expensive suit." And I saw a woman who treated my office like it was a cathedral instead of just another room to clean. Alexander leaned forward slightly. Emma, can I ask you something personal? She nodded, though her pulse quickened. Why are you working as a cleaner? And please don't think I'm judging you. I'm genuinely curious. You're clearly intelligent, educated, passionate about literature. Emma had been dreading this question, but looking into Alexander's eyes, she saw only genuine interest, no condescension or pity. My father owned a small bookstore in Mexico City, she began. It was struggling even before the economy crashed, but he refused to give up. When I graduated with my master's degree, he got sick, diabetes complications, and the medical bills. She shrugged. The bookstore failed and my family needed support. I came here thinking it would be temporary, that I'd save money and go back to teaching. But life is expensive here, and my family still needs help. And honestly, after 3 years of cleaning offices, I started to doubt myself. Started to wonder if maybe I wasn't as smart as I thought I was. Alexander's jaw tightened. Emma, look at me. She raised her eyes to meet his. You are brilliant. I've seen you handle delicate first-edition books with more care than some collectors. I've watched you organize my office in ways that make sense, not just look neat. And this conversation, the way you talk about literature, about teaching, you light up. You become someone completely different. Different how? Confident, passionate. Like you could change the world if someone gave you the chance. Emma felt tears prick at her eyes. You barely know me. Maybe. But I know enough to see that you're wasting your talents. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of his words settling between them. Emma took a sip of her now cold latte, trying to process the intensity of the conversation. What about you? She asked finally. Do you feel like you're wasting your talents running a corporation? Alexander laughed, but there was no humor in it. Honestly, sometimes. I started Hayes Corp because I wanted to create something that mattered, technology that could improve people's lives. But somewhere along the way, it became about profit margins and market share and board meetings with people who care more about quarterly returns than actual innovation. So why not change it? It's not that simple. I have investors, employees, obligations, but you're in charge, right? Ultimately, you get to decide what the company stands for. Alexander studied her face. You really believe that? I believe that we all have more power than we think we do. We just have to be brave enough to use it, even when using that power might cost us everything we've worked for. Emma thought about her own situation, her job, her family's expectations, the safe but unfulfilling life she had built. Maybe especially then. Alexander's phone buzzed, interrupting the moment. He glanced at it and frowned. I'm sorry, I have to take this. Give me just a minute. Of course. Emma watched him step outside to take the call, his posture tense as he spoke into the phone. Through the window, she could see his expression growing more serious, more frustrated. When he returned to the table, the relaxed man from earlier had been replaced by the corporate executive she was more familiar with. I'm sorry, Emma, I have to go. There's a crisis with one of our overseas projects and it's okay, she said quickly. I understand. But as Alexander gathered his things, she could see the walls going back up, the distance returning to his eyes. The intimate conversation they had shared suddenly felt like something she might have imagined. Emma, He paused, seeming to struggle with something. I had a wonderful time today. Thank you for sharing your story with me. Thank you for listening. I'd like to do this again, if you're willing. Emma's heart leaped, but she forced herself to be cautious. Alexander, I meant what I said about this being complicated. I need my job, and if people found out, they won't, not from me. He pulled out his wallet and left money on the table for both their drinks. Emma, what we talked about today, about wasting our talents, about being brave enough to use our power, I want you to think about that. What do you mean? But Alexander was already heading for the door. I'll call you, he said over his shoulder, leaving Emma sitting alone at the small table with more questions than answers. That evening, Emma replayed every moment of their conversation. The way Alexander had looked at her when she talked about teaching, the vulnerability in his voice when he mentioned feeling caught between worlds, the intensity in his eyes when he told her she was brilliant. But she also remembered how quickly he had transformed back into the corporate executive, how easily he had walked away when business called. It reminded her of the fundamental difference between their worlds. His life was filled with choices and opportunities, while hers was constrained by necessity and obligation. Her phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Thank you for today. You gave me a lot to think about. Alexander." Emma stared at the message for a long time before responding. "Thank you for seeing me. Really seeing me." His response came quickly. "How could I not?" As Emma got ready for bed, she couldn't shake the feeling that something significant had shifted during their coffee date. Alexander had looked at her like she was someone worth knowing, worth listening to. For 2 hours, she had felt like the woman she used to be, intelligent, passionate, full of ideas and dreams. But tomorrow, she would go back to cleaning his office, back to being invisible. The thought made her chest ache with a longing she had tried so hard to suppress. Maybe Carmen was right. Maybe it was time to stop playing it safe, to stop settling for a life that felt too small for who she really was. The question was whether she was brave enough to take the risk, to step into the unknown territory that Alexander seemed to be offering. As she drifted off to sleep, Emma's last conscious thought was of Alexander's eyes across the coffee shop table, the way he had said her name like it was something precious. Tomorrow, everything would go back to normal. But for tonight, she allowed herself to dream of possibilities she had almost forgotten existed. Emma arrived at work the next morning with butterflies dancing in her stomach. The memory of yesterday's coffee date felt both vivid and surreal. Had she really spent 2 hours discussing literature and life with Alexander Hayes? She deliberately saved his office for last, unsure what to expect. When she knocked on his door, his familiar voice called her in. But the man behind the desk was back to being the corporate executive. Tie perfectly knotted, hair styled, eyes focused on his computer screen. "Good morning, Emma." "Good morning, Alexander." He looked up briefly, their eyes meeting for just a moment before he returned to his work. The easy intimacy of yesterday seemed to have evaporated, replaced by a professional distance that made Emma's chest tighten. She cleaned in silence, acutely aware of his presence. Every few minutes, she could feel him glancing at her. But whenever she looked his way, he was studiously focused on his monitors. 20 minutes later, as Emma prepared to leave, Alexander finally spoke. "Emma, wait." She paused at the door, her heart hammering. "I wanted to apologize for yesterday, for leaving so abruptly." "You don't need to apologize. Business is business." "But I do need to apologize." Alexander stood up, running a hand through his hair. "Not for leaving, that couldn't be helped, but for this." He gestured between them. "For acting like yesterday didn't happen." Emma set down her cleaning supplies. "Maybe it's better if we pretend it didn't. Is that what you want?" The question hung in the air between them. Emma thought about Carmen's words, about being brave enough to use her power, about the woman she had been in that coffee shop. Confident, passionate, alive. "No," she said quietly, "but I don't know what I want." Alexander walked around his desk, stopping a few feet away from her. "I haven't been able to stop thinking about our conversation, about what you said regarding having more power than we think. Alexander, I have a proposition for you." Emma's pulse quickened. "What kind of proposition?" "Hayes Corporation is launching a new community outreach program. We want to sponsor education initiatives in underserved communities. I need someone to research and develop the program, someone who understands both education and the communities we want to serve." Emma stared at him. "You're offering me a job. I'm offering you an opportunity to use your talents. The position would be in our corporate social responsibility department. It would mean leaving the cleaning company, but the salary would be significantly higher, and you'd be doing work that actually matters to you. Emma struggled to process what he was saying. This is because of yesterday. Because you feel sorry for me. Alexander's jaw tightened. Emma, look at me. She raised her eyes to meet his. I don't offer jobs out of pity. I'm a businessman, and this program needs someone brilliant to run it, someone who understands literature, education, and what it means to fight for your dreams. That person is you. Emma felt dizzy. I can't accept a job from you. People will think I hired the most qualified candidate, which I did. Alexander, whatever this is between us, she gestured helplessly. What's between us has nothing to do with this job offer. I would have made this offer to any candidate with your qualifications and passion. He paused. But I'll admit, I'm hoping it might give us more opportunities to have conversations like yesterday's. Emma's mind raced. A real job, using her education, making a difference. It was everything she had dreamed of when she first came to New York. But accepting it felt like crossing a line she couldn't uncross. I need time to think about it. Of course, take all the time you need. Alexander returned to his desk and pulled out a business card, writing something on the back. This is my direct number. Call me when you've decided. Their fingers brushed as he handed her the card, and Emma felt that familiar jolt of electricity. Emma, Alexander said softly, for what it's worth, I think you'd be extraordinary at this job, with or without whatever this is between us. That evening, Emma sat in her apartment staring at Alexander's business card while Carmen paced excitedly around their small living room. Are you insane? Carmen demanded. He's offering you your dream job and you're hesitating? It's not that simple. It is exactly that simple. Emma, you've been cleaning offices for 3 years, sending your paychecks home, putting your life on hold. This is your chance to get it back. But what if it doesn't work out? What if I fail? What if you succeed? Carmen sat down next to her. What if you're amazing at this job? What if this is the beginning of the life you're supposed to be living? Emma looked at the card again. On the back, Alexander had written, Don't let fear make your decisions for you. There's something else, Emma said quietly. I think I'm falling for him. Carmen's eyes widened. The billionaire? Emma, that's impossible. I know. He's Alexander Hayes, and I'm nobody. You are not nobody. You're brilliant and beautiful and kind, and if he can't see that, he's an idiot. Even if he does see it, we live in different worlds. Yesterday felt like a fairy tale, but fairy tales aren't real. Maybe not, but what if this one could be? Emma's phone buzzed with a text message. Her heart jumped, thinking it might be Alexander, but it was from her sister Maria in Mexico City. Papa's medications are getting more expensive. Can you send extra this month? The reality of her situation crashed back down on her. Even if she wanted to take risks with her heart, she couldn't take risks with her family's security. I can't, she said finally. I can't take the job. Why not? Because if things go wrong with Alexander, I'll lose everything, and my family depends on me. Carmen looked like she wanted to argue, but something in Emma's voice stopped her. The next morning, Emma arrived at work with her decision made. She would thank Alexander for the opportunity, but decline the position. It was the sensible choice, the safe choice. But when she reached his office, she found it empty again. On his desk was a folder with her name on it, the detailed job description for the education outreach position. Emma flipped through it, her excitement growing despite herself. It was perfect for her, everything she had dreamed of doing. Tucked inside the folder was another note. I believe in your ability to change lives through education. The question is whether you believe it too. Emma closed the folder and made her decision. She pulled out her phone and dialed Alexander's direct number. Emma? He answered on the first ring. I'll take the job, she said before she could lose her courage. When do I start? The silence on the other end stretched so long, she wondered if the call had dropped. Alexander, I'm here. I'm just... surprised. Yesterday you seemed reluctant. I was scared. I still am. But you were right about not letting fear make my decisions. Emma, are you sure? Because once you accept, everything changes. She thought about her family, about the risks, about the way her heart raced every time she heard his voice. I'm sure, she lied, hoping confidence could be learned along the way. Then welcome to Hayes Corporation, Ms. Rodriguez. Your real career starts Monday. As Emma hung up the phone, she felt like she was standing at the edge of a cliff, about to jump into the unknown. She had no idea if she was making the best decision of her life or the biggest mistake. But for the first time in 3 years, she was about to find out who she could become when she stopped playing it safe. Emma's first day at Hayes Corporation as Education Outreach Coordinator felt like stepping into an alternate universe. Instead of arriving before dawn with a cleaning cart, she walked through the marble lobby at 9 a.m., wearing her navy blue suit and carrying a leather briefcase Carmen had surprised her with. Ms. Rodriguez? A woman in her 40s with perfectly styled red hair approached her. I'm Janet Pierce, Director of Corporate Social Responsibility. Welcome to the team. Emma followed Janet to the 20th floor, a world away from the executive level she knew so well. The CSR department buzzed with activity. Young professionals hunched over laptops, charts and graphs covering the walls. The energy of people who believed their work mattered. Your office, Janet announced, opening the door to a small but bright space with windows overlooking the city. It's not much, but it's yours. Emma stood in the doorway, overwhelmed. She had an office, with her name on a placard by the door. Emma Rodriguez, Education Outreach Coordinator. Alexander personally approved your hiring, Janet continued. He seems very confident in your abilities. I hope I can live up to his expectations. I'm sure you will. He's rarely wrong about people. The morning flew by in a whirlwind of orientations, paperwork, and introductions. Emma met her team, 3 other coordinators working on different community programs, and began reviewing the education initiative files. The scope was ambitious, partnering with schools in low-income neighborhoods, providing resources and mentorship, creating scholarship programs. It was exactly the kind of work Emma had dreamed of doing. How's the first day going? Janet asked, appearing in Emma's doorway around lunchtime. Overwhelming, but exciting. This program could really make a difference. That's what Alexander said when he pitched it to the board. He was very passionate about education initiatives. Janet's tone was casual, but Emma detected something underneath it. He mentioned he had personally identified the perfect candidate to run it. Emma felt heat rise in her cheeks. I hope to prove him right. I'm sure you will. Just a friendly piece of advice. Office relationships can be complicated, even when they seem perfectly innocent. After Janet left, Emma stared at her computer screen without seeing it. Was it that obvious? Could people already sense something between her and Alexander? She hadn't seen him all day, which was probably for the best. She needed to establish herself in this role without the complication of whatever was happening between them. At 5:30, as Emma packed up her things, her phone buzzed with a text. How was your first day? A. She stared at the message, her finger hovering over the keyboard. Professional, she reminded herself. Keep it professional. Very good. Thank you. The program has incredible potential. His response came quickly. I knew you'd see it. Dinner to celebrate? I know a quiet place where we could discuss your initial thoughts. Emma's pulse quickened. Everything in her wanted to say yes, but Janet's warning echoed in her mind. I think it's better if we keep things professional during business hours and after. This time the response took longer. Of course, you're absolutely right. Good night, Emma. Emma rode the subway home feeling like she had made the right choice, even though her chest ached with disappointment. The next few days fell into a routine. Emma threw herself into the education project, researching schools, developing curriculum partnerships, creating presentation materials for potential sponsors. She loved the work, felt energized in ways she hadn't in years. She and Alexander maintained careful professional distance. He would nod politely when they passed in the hallway, and she would respond in kind. During team meetings, their interactions were purely business-focused. To outside observers, they probably looked like nothing more than executive and employee. But Emma felt the tension simmering beneath the surface. The way Alexander's eyes would linger on her for just a moment too long during presentations. The careful space he maintained between them, as if afraid of what might happen if they got too close. The weight of unfinished conversations and unacknowledged feelings. On Friday afternoon, Emma was working late when Alexander appeared in her doorway. Burning the midnight oil? Emma looked up, startled. The office was mostly empty, the cleaning crew moving quietly through the cubicles beyond. Just finishing up the school partnership proposals. I want to have them ready for Monday's meeting. Alexander stepped into her office, closing the door behind him. The small space suddenly felt charged with electricity. Emma, we need to talk. About the project? About us. Emma's heart hammered against her ribs. Alexander, I told you. I know what you told me. And you're right to want to keep things professional, but pretending there's nothing between us is driving me crazy. He moved closer to her desk, his green eyes intense. This past week, watching you work, seeing how brilliant you are at this job, it's taken everything I have not to tell you how proud I am, how amazing you are. Alexander, I know this is complicated. I know there are rules, power dynamics, all the reasons this is a terrible idea. He leaned against her desk. But Emma, what I feel for you isn't going away. And I don't think what you feel for me is either. Emma stood up, putting the desk between them. Even if that's true, acting on it could destroy everything. My career, your reputation. What if it doesn't? What if it makes everything better? And what if it doesn't? Emma's voice rose slightly. What if this is just some fantasy for you, slumming it with the former cleaning lady? What happens when you get bored or when your board decides I'm not suitable? Alexander's expression darkened. Is that really what you think of me? I don't know what to think. A week ago, I was invisible to you. Now suddenly I'm irresistible? It doesn't make sense. You were never invisible to me. Alexander's voice was quiet but intense. I noticed you months ago, the way you moved through my office like you belonged there, the care you took with everything. I used to find excuses to work late on Tuesdays and Fridays, just hoping I might see you. Emma stared at him. You did? I did? And when your skirt tore, when I finally had an excuse to talk to you, he shook his head. Emma, you have no idea how extraordinary you are. The way your mind works, your passion for education, the strength it took to leave everything behind and start over in a new country. I've never met anyone like you. Emma felt tears prick at her eyes. Alexander, even if all of that is true, we can't what? Be happy, take a chance on something real. We can't risk everything I've worked for on a maybe. Alexander was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was carefully controlled. You're right, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have put you in this position. He moved toward the door, and Emma felt panic rise in her chest. Alexander, wait. He turned back, hope flickering in his eyes. I care about you too, more than I should. But I'm scared. I know, I'm scared too. They stood there looking at each other across the small office, the weight of everything unsaid hanging between them. What do we do? Emma whispered. I don't know, Alexander admitted. But Emma, I don't want to pretend anymore. I don't want to act like you're just another employee when you're so much more than that. Emma's phone buzzed with a text from Carmen. Working late again. Don't forget you have a life outside that office. The message snapped Emma back to reality. She looked at Alexander, at the hope and vulnerability in his expression, and felt her resolve wavering. I need time to think, she said finally. How much time? I don't know. This is all happening so fast. Alexander nodded, though disappointment flickered across his features. Take all the time you need. But Emma? Yes? Don't let fear make this decision for you. You're braver than you think. After he left, Emma sat alone in her office, staring out at the city lights. She had finally found work that fulfilled her, a chance to use her talents and make a difference. But she was also falling for a man who could either lift her up or destroy everything she had built. The question was whether she was brave enough to find out which one it would be. 2 weeks passed in careful professional distance. Emma excelled at her job, presenting her school partnership proposals to enthusiastic board members and securing funding for 3 pilot programs. Alexander attended the meetings, offering supportive comments and asking insightful questions, but maintaining the careful boundary Emma had requested. Yet the tension between them only grew stronger. Emma caught him watching her during presentations, his green eyes soft with something that looked like pride. Alexander found excuses to walk past her office, sometimes pausing to ask about her projects with an intensity that had nothing to do with business. The breaking point came on a rainy Thursday evening. Emma was working late again, fine-tuning scholarship criteria, when her computer crashed. Hours of work vanished in an instant. "No, no, no," she muttered, frantically pressing keys. "Problem?" Emma looked up to find Alexander in her doorway, suit jacket off, tie loosened. "My computer just ate 4 hours of work." She slumped back in her chair, exhausted. "Let me see." Alexander moved around her desk, leaning over to examine her screen. He smelled like coffee and that subtle cologne she remembered from his jacket. "Try this," he said, his fingers flying over the keyboard. Emma was acutely aware of his proximity, the warmth radiating from his body. There, the screen flickered and her document reappeared. Auto-save feature. Most people don't know about it. "You just saved my life." Emma turned to thank him and found herself inches from his face. His eyes dropped to her lips, and for a moment, the careful professional distance they had maintained crumbled. "Emma," he said softly. Before she could stop herself, Emma reached up and touched his cheek. Alexander's eyes closed at the contact, and when he opened them again, they were full of longing. "We can't," she whispered, but she didn't move her hand. "I know," he replied, but he leaned into her touch. The moment stretched between them, fragile and electric. Then Alexander's phone rang, shattering the spell. He stepped back quickly, answering with a sharp, "Hayes." Emma watched his expression change as he listened to whoever was on the other end. "I'll be right there," he said, hanging up. "I'm sorry, Emma. Emergency board meeting. The Singapore project is falling apart." "Go," she said, trying to steady her voice. "I'm fine." But as Alexander gathered his things, he paused at her door. "Emma, we need to talk. Really talk. About what this is, what we want it to be. Alexander, tomorrow night. Dinner. Not as boss and employee, not as billionaire and scholarship coordinator, just as Alexander and Emma." Emma's heart pounded. "What if someone sees us? Then we'll deal with it. Together." His eyes were serious, determined. "Emma, I'm tired of pretending. I'm tired of wanting you and acting like I don't, aren't you?" Emma thought about the past 2 weeks of stolen glances and careful conversations, of lying awake thinking about green eyes and gentle hands. "Yes," she admitted quietly. "Then say yes to dinner." Emma looked at him, really looked at him. Not the billionaire CEO, but the man who had given her his jacket, who had seen her potential before she saw it herself, who looked at her like she was the most fascinating person in the room. "Yes," she said before she could change her mind. Alexander's smile transformed his entire face. "I'll pick you up at 7. The next day crawled by. Emma changed outfits 3 times, finally settling on a simple black dress that Carmen declared stunning, but not trying too hard. Her hands shook as she applied makeup, her stomach a mess of nerves and anticipation. At exactly 7 o'clock, Emma's doorbell rang. She opened it to find Alexander holding a single white rose, wearing dark jeans and a button-down shirt that made his eyes look impossibly green. "You look beautiful," he said softly. "Thank you. You look—" Emma struggled for words. "Different. Good different." Alexander had chosen a small Italian restaurant in Brooklyn, far from the Manhattan business district where they might be recognized. It was intimate and warm, with checkered tablecloths and wine bottles serving as candle holders. "This place doesn't look like your usual scene," Emma observed as they were seated in a corner booth. "It's not. I found it a few years ago when I was hiding from a particularly aggressive reporter. The owner, Mrs. Romano, makes the best pasta in New York and doesn't care how much money I have." As if summoned, a tiny Italian woman appeared at their table. "Alessandro!" she exclaimed, embracing Alexander warmly. "You bring a girlfriend finally. She's beautiful." Emma felt her cheeks burn. We're figuring it out," Alexander said diplomatically, earning a knowing smile from Mrs. Romano. Over dinner, they talked about everything except work. Alexander told her about growing up in Ohio, his father's influence, the loneliness of building an empire. Emma shared stories about Mexico City, her family, her dreams of teaching that had led her down unexpected paths. "I have a confession," Alexander said as they shared tiramisu. "I've been reading Garcia Marquez since our coffee date, trying to understand what you see in his work. And I think I'm beginning to get it. The way he blends reality with dreams makes the impossible feel inevitable." Alexander's eyes met hers. "Like this. Us. 6 months ago, if someone had told me I'd be falling for the woman who cleaned my office, I'd have said it was impossible." Emma's breath caught. Falling for. Is that the wrong word? Emma thought about the way her heart raced every time she saw him, how his smile could change her entire day, the way she had started imagining a future that included green eyes and gentle hands. "No," she said quietly, "it's not the wrong word." Alexander reached across the table, covering her hand with his. "Emma, I know this is complicated. I know there are obstacles. There are more than obstacles, Alexander. There are mountains." Emma didn't pull her hand away. "Your world, my world, they're not the same. Then we'll build a new world. Together. It's not that simple. Why does it have to be complicated? I care about you. You care about me. We're both adults, both free to make our own choices." Emma looked at their intertwined hands. "What happens when your board finds out? When the press gets wind of it? When your friends start wondering what the billionaire sees in the former cleaning lady? First of all, you were never just a cleaning lady. You're brilliant and passionate, and you challenge me to be better." Alexander's grip on her hand tightened. "Second, anyone who has a problem with us doesn't deserve to be in our lives. And third, I don't care what anyone else thinks. I care what you think." Emma felt tears prick at her eyes. "I think I'm terrified." "Of what? Of getting hurt? Of losing my job? Of my family not understanding? Of not being enough for your world?" Alexander was quiet for a moment. "Emma, can I tell you something?" She nodded. "You're the first person in years who looks at me and doesn't see dollar signs. You argue with me, challenge my ideas, make me think. When I'm with you, I remember who I was before the money, before the company. You make me feel human again." "Alexander, I'm terrified too. Terrified that you'll decide I'm not worth the risk. Terrified that I'll mess this up somehow. But Emma, what we have, it's real. It's worth fighting for." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of possibility hanging between them. "What are you asking me?" Emma said finally. "I'm asking you to take a chance on us. Really us. No more professional distance, no more pretending. I want to take you to company events, introduce you as the woman I'm crazy about, stop caring who knows." Emma's heart hammered against her ribs. "And if it doesn't work out, then at least we'll know we tried. Emma, I'd rather have 6 months of something real with you than a lifetime of wondering what might have been." Emma looked into Alexander's eyes and saw everything she had been afraid to hope for: love, partnership, the possibility of a life beyond her wildest dreams. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay? Okay, let's try. Let's build that new world together." Alexander's smile was brilliant. He raised her hand to his lips, pressing a soft kiss to her knuckles. "I promise you won't regret this." As they walked out of the restaurant hand in hand, Emma felt like she was stepping into a completely different life. She had no idea what challenges lay ahead, what obstacles they would face, or how their story would end. But for the first time in years, she was excited to find out. 3 months later, Emma stood in Alexander's office. Their office, now that she had been promoted to Director of Educational Initiatives, reviewing scholarship applications. Alexander worked at his desk, occasionally glancing up to smile at her. "The Martinez scholarship candidate is incredible," Emma said. "Straight A's despite working 2 jobs to support her family. She reminds me of myself. And she's lucky to have you advocating for her." Alexander stood up, walking over to wrap his arms around her from behind. "How many scholarships are we funding this year?" 50, thanks to your board's enthusiasm for the program. Thanks to your brilliant presentation and your ability to show them the real impact we're making." Emma leaned back against his chest, still amazed that this was her life now. The transition hadn't been easy. There had been gossip, a few raised eyebrows, and one particularly nasty article in a business magazine. But Alexander had stood by her through it all, and slowly people had begun to see what he saw. That Emma Rodriguez was extraordinary at her job, regardless of how she had met the CEO. "Emma," Alexander said softly, his lips near her ear. I love you." It wasn't the first time he had said it, but it still made her heart skip. She turned in his arms, looking up into the green eyes that had become her home. "I love you too. Even if you are completely crazy for falling for your former cleaning lady. The best decision I ever made," Alexander said, leaning down to kiss her. "Well, second best. What was the first? Giving you my jacket that day. Everything good in my life started with that moment." Emma smiled, thinking about the torn skirt that had changed everything, about the courage it had taken to accept his job offer, about the leap of faith that had brought them here. "What are you thinking about?" Alexander asked. "Garcia Marquez. Something he wrote about love being the only thing that increases when it's shared. Very profound, and very true." As Alexander kissed her again, Emma thought about the journey that had brought them together. From invisible cleaning lady to director of initiatives, from stolen glances to stolen kisses, from fear to love. It had been worth every risk, every moment of doubt, every challenge they had faced. Because sometimes, if you're brave enough to reach for the impossible, it reaches back. And sometimes, the most unlikely love stories turn out to be the most beautiful ones of all.